To begin, my name is Langston Eliot Maunula. I was born in the United States, but I have a Finnish father and an American mother. So I mostly did some growing up in Finland, but I also did a lot of growing up in the United States. And because of that, I mostly consider myself a black Finnish man. Because in the United States, we have the one drop rule. It used to be legislated in Jim Crow era, where if you had any black blood in you, you were considered wholly black. And that led to some awkward moments in history where during slavery, there were a lot of children, like Creole children, who had blonde hair and blue eyes that were forced into slavery. So the topic on race is a very weird and nuanced one. But because of that, I show solidarity and I know where my family and where my culture comes from. My mother is African American and all throughout her generation has been steeped in slavery. And now we are the generation of free people. So this is what brings me to my speech about grassroots. To begin, like most bad things, this story begins in England. It's no secret that the English love their grass. It started as a utility on the battlefield where you had an unobstructed view of the scene and the enemy. You could strike without any kind of surprises, and you would also be able to defend without any kind of surprises. Now, for an Englishman of any kind of wealth and status, it was considered a status symbol to have a lawn with nothing but grass on it. This is because back in the 1800s, if you had any plot of land that was not used to grow food, that meant you were rich enough not to have to spend the money and the effort trying to grow food, but you had enough money to completely outsource that. So, this is the origin of something like a palace garden. Fun fact. Now we fast forward to 1949. William Levitt is making houses by the dozens. He's using them in order to house these new GIs that are coming back, veterans from World War II, in this booming post-war economy. And because of that, he's building a house at his peak once every 16 minutes. So, you can picture it now. That is him. Sorry, didn't switch the slides. You can picture it now. Rows of slice of pie houses, classic Americana, everything is starting to come together. You see, while William was making a killing off of this, he needed someone in order to take on the role of taking care of these types of houses and these new rules that he was going to set up. And who better to do that than his own father? That would be Abraham Levitt, the short guy in the middle. You see, Abraham Levitt was actually a very, very avid golf fan. And because of that, he actually wanted everyone in America to follow the same standards of golf that he loved. It was a booming post-war kind of economy, so a lot of people were just now having access to televisions and golf at the moment. So it seemed like the right moment. You see, by working in agreements into the contract, he would have enforcers make sure that everyone had their grass cut to a certain type of dimension. He would have these enforcers come over and forcibly cut your grass. Now, it was not for free because, well, he would send you the bill afterwards and a hefty fee. So, he reset the stage for modern America. We have lawns cut within an inch of their life. We have rows of single-family houses as far as the eye can bleed over. And a scenery that looks like something out of a postcard, if that postcard was a vague threat. Now, what's wrong with this image here? Well, let's look at grass from an organic viewpoint. Grass will only grow in about 0.02% of the United States naturally. We're talking about English grass here. However, it is more than 4% of the United States agricultural industry. That beats out corn 3 times over. It is the single most grown crop in the history of the United States, and there will not be a single plant to ever come near it. Now, we have a plant that only grows in about 2% of the United States, and if you can tell, that's right about here in New Jersey. But because of this standard of needing to have grass in your lawns, Americans overconsume fertilizer and pesticides, which have been called worse than Zyklon B. It is a very, very damaging industry to the environment as a whole. Now, all this is coming for the most irrigated crop in the United States history. But now we have to get on to the more ugly history. This leads us to the reality that many people have kept up the institution of grass so abreast simply as a weapon in the tool of racists. Now, these institutions that have been steeped in racism are much like the Homeowners Association. Well, for those of you that don't know what a homeowners association is, a homeowners association is a collective agreement whereby people who purchase houses together or have a certain land in this area are bound by this agreement. And these agreements do have governing bodies and people that enforce them. So, after the end of the Jim Crow redlining, which was pictured over here, there was the Homeowners Association that would step up and start banning people from certain types of, like people living in their house, mostly people of color. They would ban religious expressions, sometimes lawn ornaments. And unfortunately now, redlining is done because of the Civil Rights Act, which actually did not directly end redlining. It actually had to be ended 2 years later once it was interpreted as being broad enough to include redlining. So, after redlining was over, the Homeowners Association still kept up the work that redlining would no longer do. And what they would do is that they would start doing over-policing for certain types of people living in homeowners associations. Now, I guess we can all imagine what kind of people I'm talking about when they're talking about over-policing certain situations. Now, these institutions have been used by many years to bully the black and brown people of the United States for many, many generations. Now, because it is strange to me that a black man working for pennies to a white man's dollar is expected to come home after hours and hours of working simply to pour more money into a dirty lawn that has no right to be there, that is resisted by the very nature itself. It is unfair and an unrealistic expectation. So, when the Homeowners Association came after my grandfather for an unkempt lawn, I'm sorry that it was that way, but he was too busy mowing yours. Now, this is why black people find it so hard to shed harmful stereotypes. Now, when you think about it, the classic stereotype of, a racist image of a black man is one person who's too lazy to take care of his surroundings. I'd say he's too overworked to care. Now we can see that there are crazy, Now we can see that there are crazy origins of this strange turf warfare here. So now, we bring it to today, where if a black man asks for what is owed from him, he is seen as somehow lazy or entitled, or just simply wants more handouts. This could not be further from the truth. You see, my family were once the inheritors of a plantation. This plantation was in South Carolina. Now, back when my family was a brown family, it was adopted after the end of slavery, where they were supposed to get this farm. They produced tobacco and cotton for a company called King Cigars. Now, I don't think King Cigars is around anymore, or it has been absorbed by a larger cigar company, but today my family sees no profits from this plantation. And the reason behind that is because the state sponsored a white man to come over and simply take what was theirs and owed to them. He walked away after working 0 hours and spending not one night on that farm and took every single penny of it. This is state-enforced violence from the government itself. So now I ask you, who asks for these handouts? So, whenever the conversation of reparations comes up again, I'm told that my losses are simply too old, that the perpetrators are long gone, that it's just something we have to forget. This could not be further from the truth. The perpetrator and the architect of this violence is the United States government itself. The United States government sponsored this type of violence against me and my family for generations. Now, you might think that these acts in slavery are too far removed. That is also not true. I am only 2 people removed from a person who was born into slavery and bred like livestock. A person, my great-great-aunt, who told my grandmother stories of how she yearned for sunlight through prison bars. And my grandfather, who was born into a farm where they made sure that he knew that if he were to ever leave this farm for any reason, he would be put to the noose immediately. He worked on that farm at 11 years old, the moment he was able to look over the steering wheels of a tractor. Now, to this day, there are still many points of racial inequality in the United States, where black people and white people have probably the farthest gap in the United States. And black people still handle many different types of racial inequalities. Like, we do not have access to certain types of mortgages that would help us live in certain areas where we would get tax advantages, or certain areas where we wouldn't have to deal with certain types of homeowners associations. So, these are the problems that my grandparents died trying to solve. Now, I want to tell you the story about a man named Steve Perkins. Steve Perkins was walking outside of his door one day to see a man trying to repossess his car. Repossessing meaning that somebody did not pay their bills on something and a car would come and just simply take it away. Of course, Steve actually was up to date on all of his payments, so he promptly told the guy to go fuck himself, naturally. So the man then drove away and immediately called the police. The police then told him, "Try again, we'll be there for you." The police, in the dead of night, hid in the bushes next to his house. And so, when that repo officer tried to come and take the car from him, again, Steve walked outside and tried to stop him. He walked outside with a flashlight, not a gun, a flashlight. And as soon as he started to approach him, before he could get his first words out, the police leapt from the bushes, said, "Get on that," and before they even said ground, they shot 18 times at him, killing him immediately, while his wife and daughter were inside that house. Now, he died knowing that all of his payments were up to date. If we look it up today, the business that tried to repossess that car has a 0 on the Better Business Bureau because it's in their model to steal as much as possible from the poor, black, and brown in that city. And every single time, it is the police that back their actions. These are the same police that were formed after the end of slavery as a slave-catching unit. So I want all of you to think about it. The next time someone gives you some kind of racist dream about the future of America being all white, and well, there's no black people in their neighborhoods. Now you see why the picket fence is white. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Eliot. Before we start with the Q&A, can I ask you to turn off your microphone so Maya can put it on already? Our next speaker? No, I'll just use this microphone for you. You can take it off. Perfect.
It all the way off.
Yes, take it all the way off. Thank you. And then we have it transferred. Thank you so much for that. I want to, maybe before I start asking questions, are there people in the audience that have a question? So then I'll just follow up. Don't be shy. That was me singing. Okay, I'll just start then. In your talk, you said people are too overworked to care. I thought that was a very beautiful sentence that you used. What made you want to... I wanted to first of all ask you, what made you want to come on here today and talk about grassroots? But I think in your talk you explained very much why you chose this specific topic. Mm-hmm. Do you sometimes feel as a person of color that topics such as these are overlooked as well, in not only in the United States but also in Finland or just in the Netherlands?
Well, they certainly are overlooked, but that's the reason why I try to bridge these topics with mundane things like grass. You wouldn't think of somebody's lawn as being a racist institution, and oftentimes you do turn your nose at the idea. You think, yeah, it can't be true. It just grows out of the ground. But by bridging these topics, I do give people the starting point where they can leap off of these things and begin to question the broader context of these. Mm-hmm. So that's what I really wanted out of the speech, is to at least give people the context of something.
Yeah, give them something to think about.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that your family was about to inherit a plantation. Just for clarity,
did.
what does that mean? So was it a plantation where people that were made slaves were working, or were they freed? What was that kind of situation?
Well, let me put it this way. You see, before the end of slavery, actually, the leader of the plantation was a very, how can I put it, eclectic man. He actually was one of the first people to integrate schools in Georgia, because when he raped a slave and the kids came out, he said, "Oh, those are mine. Those are my kids." So he put the kids through white school. And apparently, after raping a slave, it was very softened his heart. I have no idea how that worked. But after he died, he had no heirs except for those black kids that were his, at least on paper, his heirs. So they took the last name Brown, and then they were able to operate as owners of it, shared owners. And then it was only years later that the state sponsored someone to just take it, because they found it an offense to the state that black people would own this much property.
Wow, I mean that's this makes me think of a Logic lyrics. It says, "In my blood is the slave and the master." How do you go about that mentally, knowing that that in your history, in your bloodline, there's both?
I mean, I don't really have to come to grips with anything special about it, because actually a lot of black people in the United States do have like some white blood in them, because like raping a slave was very common. And that's the reason why the whole one-drop rule was very important, because you didn't want to give the children of these slave masters as much rights as their other white children. And so that's also an important reason why I consider myself black, because the one-drop rule applies to me too.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Any questions from the audience for Eliot about his talk? No questions? Okay. Then I want to ask you all to give him one last big applause. Thank you so much.